So hello and welcome to the Leading Organization Case Discussion Session. This is Mishra here, your faculty at Quantic. Before Quantic, I have been in the area of entrepreneurship, leadership, strategy, and global business at various B schools in the United States, and have also worked with institutions around the world. I'm interested and active in the startup world ever since the early 90s and had a spell as an entrepreneur when I founded a startup company in 2013 in the domain of entrepreneurial learning for 5 years before exiting. I have mentored scores of early and advanced levels startups and helped build the entrepreneurial ecosystem across the globe in various regions, starting with the New York Mid-Hudson region back in 2005. So with that introduction, let me pull up and share my screen. Just a moment. Okay. Can you see the screen? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hope you can hear me clear. Can you?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah, it's good.
Great. Today we are discussing the case on Dan Mortell on the topic of entrepreneurial leadership. This topic is gaining significance in the light of the growth in startup world. Our environment is changing and evolving rapidly. There are many pain points and gaps in the market, and the entrepreneurs are finding solutions to a variety of problems facing the people of the world. We all know that. So the leadership coming from entrepreneurs is quite remarkable. It is a unique brand of leadership that demonstrates a mindset that is different from other kind of leaders. Our dynamic and increasingly resource-crunched world much needs this kind of leadership. Today's case on Dan Mortell will give us an inner view of the world of a serial entrepreneur who envisioned several tech solutions and led his ventures to success despite failures. Is there a leadership model in his life that we can learn from as participants of this program? I had communicated about this case in the description part of today's session when you signed up for this webinar. There I had provided you with the link to the case and expect that you would have given the case a good reading. I hope you would have done that. So let us dive into it. But before that, let me introduce the session plan for you. So we will begin with the introduction of the case on Dan Mortell, a serial entrepreneurial leader. In case you could not read the case, this introduction will lay out the basics of the case for you. Next, my introduction would lay out the basic context of the case, and if you have any questions, we can discuss them in about 5 minutes following the intro part. After the Q&A and interaction, we will break out into small groups. In your respective breakout group, you will discuss 2 basic questions on the case. The breakout session will last for about 15 to 20 minutes. I have provided the 2 questions on the case in the chat box. There is also a link in the chat box that should open in your browser. It is a Google Sheet with the same 2 questions, and you can make your notes during the breakout session on it. After the breakout session, all groups will come back and reassemble here. Each breakout group can then present the gist of your discussion around the 2 questions. And finally, in about last 5 minutes, I will share with you the learnings and the conclusive parts of our session today. All right, so now on to the introduction of the case. Story of the Canadian serial entrepreneur Dan Mortell and his entrepreneurial success journey. Dan Mortell has so far founded 5 ventures to date, and he's on to his 6th one. 2 of his ventures failed and were closed. The subsequent 2 ventures had successful, profitable exits. At the end of the case, Dan is working on his fifth one, you would have noted. His first venture, maritimevacations.com, was a website building company for cottage and bed and breakfast services. His second venture, NB Host, was a web hosting service company. His third venture, Spheric Technologies, was about customization of web portals, especially for large corporations such as Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson. This venture was to build software that managed the deployment of web applications, portals, and intranets. Dan's fourth venture is Flowtown, which was an innovative social media marketing platform business. His fifth venture is a work in progress, where the case leaves us. He has named it Clarity. Clarity will instantly connect budding entrepreneurs with successful entrepreneurs for their battle tested advice. Interestingly, I spotted Dan's sixth venture a few days back. It is called the SaaS Academy for Growth Coaching. Always out to make success of a new emerging opportunity. Here is the picture of Dan's SaaS Academy in action. The Academy is growing teams of high performing, the rock stars of SaaS founders. What leadership model can be drawn from Dan's serial entrepreneurial journey? Can it be learned from or modeled after? He would tell you that each venture, successful or unsuccessful, teaches you about new opportunity evaluation. That entrepreneurs should look at three interrelated elements for their opportunity selection. One, the unmet needs of people. Two, the gaps in the marketplace. And three, the ability to improve on a suboptimal process through technology. That entrepreneurs should not be limiting their potential customer base and picking too small a niche. It will destroy your business, he would say. Hence, in his model, choosing a big market opportunity is defining. That you should have the ability to separate not only the good from the bad, but also the great from the good. As an entrepreneur, you should decipher between a good and a great opportunity before investing your scarce time, effort, and money. He would encourage you to ask, is what is desired possible? Is what is possible desired? Considering his user feedback, Mortell would form an idea and begin searching the market to see if it is or anything similar to it existed. If Mortell could not find the solution he formulated, then perhaps this was a gap in the marketplace and perhaps he could address the need. If the solution, product, or service did not exist, Mortell would study its current functionality and consider ways in which he could improve it 10x. Mortell knew that only those solutions that offered exponential benefits could displace existing competitors. So Dan Mortell had a lean startup mindset. He would frequently call potential clients asking them about the type of problems they were encountering. He believed in early and continuous customer feedback, defined as the customer development process. So Dan believed that a great opportunity only satisfies a customer's need to the extent that they are willing to pay for the product or service that is being offered. When building a team or an organization, always keep the three key corners of the talent triangle. It's there in your case. So you should always keep in mind business acumen, domain expertise, and operational effectiveness. And Dan built this into his organizations for each of his venture, especially after the first two did not succeed. And then innovate and deploy appropriate business model, Dan would say each time. come up with an innovative business model, and have a clear, tested vision in mind and be ready to work very, very hard. So, this is Dan Martell's entrepreneurial leadership model. In his model, Dan would caution entrepreneurs not to think that doing a successful startup is by any chance easy, because it is not. In the case of a startup with successful exit, the sheer value often paid for these companies can create a success bias in one's own cognitive perception of the difficulty that is associated with opportunity evaluation and building a startup, let alone selling a startup. The rigorous roads that startups take often are underappreciated. Securing venture backed financing, working extremely long hours, building a minimum viable product, acquiring proof of concept, and developing sales are just a few of the common difficulties a startup encounters. Dan was extremely familiar with these extreme and exhausting processes of startup life. Other aspects of Dan Martell model comes from his character. One, Dan was a risk taker. He treated chaos as his normal. He took huge risks during his younger years. However, the risks associated with being an entrepreneur, which may seem severe to some, do not seem hazardous to Martell at all. Dan was courageous. He believed that an entrepreneur's job is to quietly lead people into battle and victory, demonstrating courage. He is adaptive, a true entrepreneur who has an adversity quotient and a keen ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Dan learned from errors. Like many successful founders, he has learned from those errors and took the necessary steps to ensure that he continuously improved going forward. Dan has grown confident of entrepreneurial capability. He truly believed that he could turn a good idea into a startup, then turn a startup into a successful company, and in turn make money for himself and his investors. So Dan valued being accountable and he's humble, both. He's no longer motivated by money or fame. His motivation today lies in his accountability to other people, specifically to his family, his employees, and his customers. And as they say, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. Dan was just that. He stepped out twice from good jobs to follow his guts as an entrepreneur. He left his long, luxurious vacations to take up another venture before he believed he had certain skills, because he believed he had certain skills and that it would be disservice not to do what he was meant to. Make the world, that is, make the world a better place through his technology and software. He walked away even from his earn-out purchase agreement 3 short months, thereby losing money. For what? To do another venture. For Dan Martell to develop entrepreneurial leadership qualities, his past and especially his childhood seems highly relevant. So let's take a view. Dan Martell was born in a small city in Canada. Since the childhood, he was entrepreneurial. Even as a young boy, Martell instinctively noticed and capitalized on an opportunity. For example, he would frequently build snow forts behind his home, renting them to his friends for a few dollars a day, and made his first profit. Dan was a special child diagnosed with the ADHD. We all are familiar with this. It would become his strength, however, rather than a weakness. Dan had a challenging childhood. Adding to his perfect storm was two critical events. That is, his parents divorced and he discovered drugs. And between the ages of 13 and 15, Martell broke into cars and dealt drugs. At the age of 15, Martell was arrested for drug related activities. At age 17, Martell was arrested again on drug related charges, and being a repeat offender, he received 9 months in prison. But the turnaround came. Dan decided he needed to change his life and checked himself into rehabilitation after coming out of the prison. The rest is history. He became a successful entrepreneur and had a happy family to which he was totally committed. So, as we just said, Dan Mortell believed he should be accountable to his family, employees, markets, and investors. He is desirous of a happy and committed family. This wonderful picture of Dan's family I found on the internet, it conveys his commitment. Let's touch on Dan's first venture. So we can recall, Dan bought a computer programming book while at the rehabilitation center, taught himself how to program, and began writing computer applications after computer applications. And he never looked back as a software developer. For his first venture, at his dad's advice, he started building websites for small cottage rental businesses. Interestingly, he went on to validate his venture idea beforehand as a proof of concept. He was profitable, but soon Dan's cottage website business went under as a new big competitor entered the fray. The nature of his second tech venture was hosting service company, that is, host websites for businesses that are anywhere in the country. This time, Dan made sure not to limit his client base uh, as before. A large demand for websites as companies were moving online. The demand for hosting companies, servers where those websites reside, would increase to match. It was expected around that time. But Dan faced a number of challenges. First was the entry barrier of capital. Hosting equipment and software were not as common as they are today, which made them very expensive. So he spent approximately 20,000, most of which he had saved from his previous venture, if you remember. Uh, Second, as he built his client base for NB Host, he realized that he was going sideways instead of upwards. The revenue he was making from hosting needed to be re-injected back into his company to cover an increase in operating costs for every new client's website. Third, the more clients he got, the more time and work needed to be invested in the company. So he was working round the clock. Fourth, he realized that it was not a scalable business that he was in. Constantly operating in a depleted state inhibited his ability to progress. He realized that you cannot monetize a good opportunity if that opportunity requires constant support and supervision. So Dan closed NB Host, taking a $15,000 loss. And his learning from this venture was grow revenue exponentially while only growing expenses linearly. For his third venture, Spheric Technologies, Dan Mortell built customized web portals for big corporations to manage the deployment of web applications, portals, and internets. So Dan now had a team that completed his talent triangle, consisting of business acumen, operational experience, and domain knowledge. So they built software applications and outsourced the business related activities. Very smart of him. Dan and his team at Spheric Technologies bootstrapped the company from onset, which is very challenging. They had realized that larger the value add a company can provide, the faster the potential adoption of its product, which is a common characteristic of a survivor bootstrapped company like Spheric Technology. Spheric's technology added value to its customers at a time when those customers needed it most. His clients were big corporations like Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson. And Spheric Technologies had been created. The company had no debt, grew an average of 152% per year. It's very extreme for startups, um, and had approximately 30 employees already. So in May of 2008, Dan Mortell sold Spheric Technology to Function One, a software company which was specializing in enterprise technologies. That was at the age of 27, Dan Mortell officially had become a millionaire. Dan's fourth venture, Flowtown, was a social marketing application for small businesses. Flowtown software allowed a customer to take any email address and find the social demographic of the person to whom the email address belonged. Remarkable. A business using Flowtown could then use that information to launch more focused and targeted marketing campaigns. So Dan had a skin in the game with investment of $200,000. Like a lean startup creating Crusader, Dan first tested the market for their product by launching a non-functional demo of their proposed solution. Through this, he and his partner had found a worthwhile value proposition with massively growing demand for social media marketing. So Dan's Flowtown now generated 20,000 of revenue per month and soon had more than 50,000 customers. Great traction there. Now look at this. Flowtown was created in November of 2009, and in October 2011, Demandforce purchased Flowtown. Demandforce is a company based out of San Francisco which focuses on providing small businesses with access to the tools and platforms that large enterprises use to communicate with customers. The interests of Demandforce, as you can see, and Flowtown seemed closely aligned. The case ends at Dan's fifth venture, Clarity. It was an interesting idea that he came up with. So, the news of Dan Mortell's second successful exit spread, and a flurry of telephone calls from startup founders came to Mortell. Mortell spoke to and advised as many, but could not devote all his time. So, Dan's new goal now was to help entrepreneurs around the world. He considered a new business opportunity that he would call Clarity, a marketplace of entrepreneurs for battle-tested advice from experts in a specific field. So Dan wanted to ensure that his solution was not catering to a niche market. The market seemed huge, timely, and durable, and also multinational. Clarity was to be turned into a viable, scalable, sustainable, and profitable business model. So Dan asked a set of highly relevant questions. Would people pay? Would there be enough people wanting to pay? Would experts consider shifting their goodwill free calls into an income stream? Would such an income stream be big enough for true experts to bother? So he went on to find out whether or not people were willing to pay for the service before he went ahead and built it. Interestingly, Mortell's early user testing confirmed that people wanted to access the tacit knowledge of experts and would be willing to pay for it. Great. So we have completed the introduction part of the case, and here are the discussion questions. Question 1. Learning from the case, what objective criteria should a founder evaluate before committing wholeheartedly to a startup? And question number 2. What traits and learnings of Dan Mortell as a successful serial entrepreneur can be emulated by a startup founder? So I have posted these two questions in the chat box for you to discuss during the breakout session. Now we can spend some time interacting on the case. Any questions, comments? Any comments, thoughts, questions? You have read the case and this would have been a refresher for you. So let's clear any doubts before we get into breakout session. Any question that you may have or any thoughts from anywhere. The concept is entrepreneurial leadership.
Yeah, no, questions are straightforward, so I think
Sure.
we're okay.
Okay, just keep in mind that entrepreneurial leadership is an evolving concept, and you would have read several leadership theories by now, or you would be doing it in coming week or so before you have your leadership exam. There are similarities, but there is overlap. I'm not saying an entrepreneurial leader covers every aspect of other kind of leaders, like transformational leader or transactional leader or any other type. But there is something unique about it. If you can spell that out, but in the context of the startups and entrepreneurship that you have been exposed to. So that's my little word here. And unless anybody else has any thought that comes to your mind, we would be ready to break out in 2 groups. All right, so there we go. We will spend about 10 to 12 minutes, let's say, discussing 2 questions. If any of those questions is more of your favorite, you can focus more on that. It's all right. You don't have to cover both these, but if you want to, that'll be a good thing as well. Then we'll come back and discuss, and we'll see what is our learning. Great. So I'll be visiting one by one, both the groups, and tuning in with the thoughts. I wouldn't be participating. So please go ahead and have your meaningful conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
Right? Okay, great. So we break into groups now. I've opened all the rooms. Hello, AP, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Harsh.
Okay,
Sorry,
let me assign. Okay, let me assign you to one of the groups, one of the rooms where the conversation is taking place. Maybe you can join them and then come back. We are almost done, but maybe even for a minute or so you could join. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back from the breakout session. Hope you had a productive time discussing the case, and hope everyone in your breakout room was participative. I did peep into your breakout room and I saw some good stuff going there, good conversations, good points. So each breakout group can now present the gist and the basic arguments that got discussed in your group. So please take a few minutes to tell us that. So let's start. Let me pull up the Google Sheet. Well, I have it here. I can see it. You also have it. So let's start with breakout room 1.
I can summarize with help from my colleagues because I took the bullet point notes that are in there. So we focused on question 1. And we diverged a little bit from that because it was interesting. And so, but in terms of objective criteria, we all agreed that proof of concept was the interesting point in what Dan Mortell did, and including, quite a shocking one for me was a proof of concept that actually did nothing other than test one thing, such as will people click on this button, and therefore they'll want to pay. So really simple. testing one thing, and the right question to ask was being answered by that proof of concept, and it wasn't overblown. There wasn't a lot of investment in it, so it was very early test. Another thing that came up was about scalability. Not quite sure how to test for that, but having something that would scale, have something that you could maybe create a plan for scaling. But I don't know how you figure that out, because obviously he figured it out by getting it wrong. But how do you figure that out up front? And then Aaron, I think, said he was talking about, or Delgo, I forget, was talking about uniqueness as well. So, we were talking about pandemic and how startups like Peloton came about, but now it's just an exercise bike with an iPhone in it. So, is there something about uniqueness, a unique idea, a unique way of serving an idea that is important to assess as an objective criteria? And then finally, it was sort of, does it serve people in a good way? Does it provide something new or replace something in a better way? Was another criteria that came out in discussion. And then we got off onto things like Teslas and the inability to service, the infrastructure and so on. Anyway, it was a good rambling discussion. But I think proof of concept, scalability, uniqueness were the things that came out. So.
Great, that was very good, Carl. I think very good points your group came up with. Delgado and Arun, do you have anything to add to what Carl shared?
No, so I think what's an interesting statistic is we saw the failure that Dan had, where he had to wrap it up and lose his $15,000. A statistic that we talked about was 40% of electric vehicle users return back to fossil fuels. I think that's a telling number. I think that the entrepreneurial spirit of Tesla is there, but there's something to be had by that statistical number. And I think when we discussed it, infrastructure and satisfaction that you get sitting on the side of the road because you don't have an infrastructure to charge your car, those are two things that are weighed heavy, I think, in an electric vehicle operator's mind, or somebody that goes out and invests that kind of money. I think the other thing too is the price point, or the price tag. As you drive an electric vehicle, at some point, you're going to have to get rid of the batteries and pay for those, or you're going to have to replace those batteries, and that's going to cost something. So I think that is another pressure point of Tesla users or electric vehicle users, is where do the batteries go after I, have depleted them, and how much is it going to cost? So again, it's the satisfaction level that's depleted from after the excitement goes away from having the car, especially when you have to start paying for things. So anyway, just a bullet point.
Okay, great. That was a very good example you discussed. In fact, yesterday at my dinner table, we were discussing Tesla. Some of these points came up, right? They continue to face the challenge, even though they are one of the most innovative in their space. But some of these challenges would continue to be relevant, and yes, infrastructure yet to develop, at least in other countries. The United States maybe is doing well. It's coming up. I can see several entrepreneurs also working around it.
Yeah, you would think that, but the United States is far behind in infrastructure.
Still behind.
We are still behind. And the other thing is all these electric vehicles are causing power quality issues at residential feeders. So as the loads occur on level 2 chargers, it's pulling the load for the entire feeder, and you get to start light flickers in residential homes. So it's an interesting concept, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Still need
no, I think,
right.
And I think you brought all the good points, proof of concept, and the scalability and the uniqueness. And, the model that he had considered, and yes, he became clear over the time. There was a learning along the way. But the 2-3 models that he has, for example, going in for a good idea, not a bad idea, that's obvious, but not just good, and great, so, and something that would give you 10x kind of exponential return. That poses a challenge, and how do you really do it? The framework of unmet needs of people, you look at that, or you look at the gaps in the marketplace. And there's a very interesting way he goes about really looking at an idea, what kind of mental model he uses. I think it's worth looking at. And I have seen that this mental model has a lot more clarity than when I asked other entrepreneurs exactly how did you consider scalability or uniqueness aspect, but I can see there's relatively much more clarity. And that's why he has gone into now doing his acceleration program and working with entrepreneurs, because that clarity comes across, when they are evaluating their own SaaS products, which he wants to mentor. So yes, and and also the talent triangle. I think that was it's obvious, but to bring that on the table and use it, I think that also helped a lot. So there's several good points. But the second question, I guess your group did not go into, which was the traits and learnings of Dan Mortell. Essentially, in the second question, we wanted to know what is that generalizable aspect, about Dan Mortell, which others can either find in themselves or they can learn without paying too high a price. What is that part that can be emulated? Is this transferable? Is it emulatable? That's the question. Maybe second group can address it in case if they have. So let's ask the second breakout group. Let's hear your findings, your points, and then maybe we can visit this point as well.
Hi, everyone. So it was just Katerina and myself, and we chose to answer question number 1. And we found it really interesting that his first 2 ventures, he was a sole entrepreneur. He didn't have any partners. He was doing everything himself. He definitely didn't have the talent triangle, and those first 2 ventures failed. Mm-hmm. So then when he proceeded to his subsequent ventures, he engaged the talent triangle, people with complementary skills, and partnered with other people. So we also talked about, looking at the market size and scalability, and are there any constraints, and being able to do a lot of research. And I think, Katerina is in taxation. I work for a large healthcare corporation. Neither one of us are entrepreneurs in our life right now. But I think having that business plan with a pro forma, the financials, the hard financials and the projections are really important to take a deep look at too, before committing to a startup. Katerina, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that you have covered very well what we were discussing. So pretty similar points to the first group.
Okay, wonderful. And AP, you joined the second group a little late. If you have any points, please feel free to add.
Nothing much on my side, thanks.
Okay, good. So yes, I think your group also came up with very good points here. And you had some points in common, like proof of concept. But I was struck with this very important concept called customers' willingness to pay. This is so critical. And this is where the entire lean methodology comes in, which Carl also mentioned. How do you find out at a low cost, early from the market, a meaningful feedback, and especially focused on, can they pay for the kind of product? Is their benefit high enough that it'll get them into action to pay, right? And because if the differential is too little, perhaps it does not move them. They like the product, it's incrementally better, but it's not radically so great that they would be willing to switch and give their loyalty. So willingness to pay concept is very, very critical, and to get to know about it early on. Other than that, I think who can partner with talent triangle, so how do you build your team? And if you could remember Mortell's case, where how he was one of those early, he would recognize pretty early who's best for the team, and he was willing to come on board, and invest and take the decisions. So he was rather rapid in forming meaningful team, and especially in the tech area. Rest of the services, at least up till his third venture, he outsourced. but team formation and then building the team, an aligned team, not so much team which is separate from each other, but who have shared vision and shared values, right? And then it can really come about very, very quickly. And I also like the concept of develop a business plan with performer and what type of pricing model. Pricing is so critical. Actually, the method that Mortell had used of having this dummy website and people visiting that, and he still hadn't the product, right? And still he could calculate the number of clicks, and that gave an idea of the demand, right? So nowadays people have come up with innovative ways of connecting with the market early on, before even going into any beta model, because that is also pretty expensive, or it's quite a distance already traveled before you can turn back. So they try various means to get a sense of the market, to gauge the viability, and pricing is very critical. So the kind of pricing that you have in mind early on, I hope that every and a leader always come up with something innovative. There's so much innovation that can go into pricing. It's not that, okay, we will have a freemium model and everybody does that, therefore I will do it. But do you really understand the reason? I mentor this one company in oil and gas, it's a knowledge portal, and they learned the hard way. They were almost on the verge of getting wiped out until they figured out the pricing, right, for various products that they had. So yes, these are all very good points, and so I'm glad you could connect with this. And the concept of entrepreneurial leadership, if you look at organizations nowadays, it is almost implied that the leaders need to have some entrepreneurial outlook in them. So entrepreneurship, which is entrepreneurship within corporations, is almost inevitable. You coming up with new business, new revenue stream, new products, and how do you really turn around a company into an entrepreneurial culture? So many of those skills or the kind of mindset that's required by entrepreneurs now are very actively sought in bigger corporations, increasingly. And I've seen that in last 5-10 years. So being an entrepreneur always pays. But then not all entrepreneurs can also are very adept at running large organizations. And that's why you find that when the startups grow beyond a certain stage, not all founders are suitable to run the company, which has already grown big. Sometimes even founders, either they excuse themselves from such roles, or in some cases they get booted out also in the interest of the company and their own investment. So it's interchangeable, and this is why this topic of entrepreneurial leadership at any role these days, because things are becoming so cross-functional and interdisciplinary and so market-oriented. You're continuously, you can never draw the conclusion from the past as to how you understood the market, because the market has changed its colors and form. So you have to go in and understand it better. And that's when you can generate or continue to sustain the revenue that your company has. So yes, that's the reason we are looking at this concept of entrepreneurial leadership. So what is our conclusive thought on today's case discussion? I would say one, which we did not address today, but I believe that reading the case, and if you give it a careful thought, you'll find that Dan Mortell's model of entrepreneurial leadership can be emulated by entrepreneurs, right? So there is a significant part which people can learn from. There are several aspects. The second takeaway from today's session is that, and from the case, is to stay humble. Humble meaning learning from errors and mistakes going forward. And this is a way of life for entrepreneurs, where they learn how to change even the poisonous situation into a medicine, turning poison into a medicine. For example, failure is often not expected or valued in large corporations, because the cost of failing is very high. So it is for entrepreneurs, but they are much more nimble. And what happens is the failures become a repository of great insights for them. This is why the serial entrepreneurship comes about. So what Dan learned from the previous venture, he deployed it in the next and the next, right? Therefore, his failures began to turn into success, right? I'm not saying this is very straightforward formula, but anyone who's self-reflective on their failures would find that it's like a mining the wisdom, of doing a new business. The other point is taking worthy risks and managing them to make them less risky. So this was quite a trait of Dan Mortell, and because he had a very risky younger days, so he didn't hesitate taking risks. But he felt that risks are, especially entrepreneurial risks, are words. That's the art of entrepreneurship, is that you take risks and then you manage to make it less risky. So the turning risks into disproportionate success. That's the so anyone who's not taking risks, who's playing safe and would want things to be absolutely streamlined, they are also shrinking their opportunity. That has been found. Then last couple of points. One is demonstrating your entrepreneurial leadership openly and repeatedly. Test your hypothesis product like Dan Mortell did. Engage with your market. Listen to them. Do your customer discovery, right? So this is very important. We learned about that. Some creative ways, some innovative ways. Always keep that in mind. And you would come up with an innovative business model. Business model is so integral. You may have a product innovation, process innovation, but unless you have, because the business and the marketplace is changing, right? And the businesses also change their form. So how do you come up with that right kind of business model, right? So you can take a look at business model canvas or lean canvas. Some of these frameworks are very important. They're very dynamic in nature. And then stay committed and accountable to all important stakeholders. So that balance that entrepreneurs need to have, it's so critical, especially for entrepreneurs, between family, employees, customers, and investor. And you could see that Dan was doing good here. He didn't seem to be spinning out of balance here, and because he had those priorities. And that paid, because you find large number of entrepreneurs, they lose out on that balance. So they have crisis one place or the other. If they're focusing a lot on customers, they may overlook the interests of the employees. Or if they're focusing on these two stakeholders, they may lose the interest of investors. And if they have all these three, they may have a problem with their family life because they don't have time for family. So how do you balance all that out? That's why the core values since the beginning is very important. And the last part is believe in sharing your learning with others. I have seen entrepreneurs, it's so natural to them, especially the ones who are in touch with the time and the opportunity and who can sense the environment, are the ones who also share their learning, their insights with other entrepreneurs. Just like Dan Mortell has now started the accelerator program. This is an opportunity for him to keep himself updated, to be in touch with others, being a part of others' success. This is so common for entrepreneurs, right? And they actually demonstrate a very different kind of leadership and opportunity because they're in touch with so much of dynamism, unlike other places where, in fact, corporations very proactively, look for such dynamism that entrepreneurs have. So yeah, I think these are some of the points that come to mind. So it was good to have you all at the webinar today. we can conclude the session here unless anybody has any closing thought.
Thank you very much for leading it.
Thank you.
Great. So take care and stay safe.
Bye.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.